Gardevoir is one of the most popular Pokemon of all time, for a variety of reasons, and when this all-new Psychic type released in Gen 3, it was poised to rival the many Psychic types that came before it, like Alakazam and Jynx. But in competitive play, Gardevoir initially struggled to find its footing. Gardevoir has a more defensive stat distribution than fellow mono-Psychic type Alakazam, with a great special defense stat and lower speed. But Gardevoir just ends up finding itself in between a defensive and offensive role, not really thriving in either area. With such low HP and defense, and no great healing or utility moves, Gardevoir isn't really a wall, and with that below average speed, you'd much rather use a faster Psychic type attacker for a more offensive Pokemon, like Alakazam, Starmie, or Jirachi. Gardevoir is hard to fit on teams or find reasons to use, and in later games, it tends to be ranked in lower tiers with poor usage. But has Gardevoir ever been good in competitive? Does it have anything to offer over its counterparts? Let's take a look at Gardevoir throughout the years and the few times it has found a place on competitive teams. We'll also talk about Mega Gardevoir in Gens 6 and 7, which was actually quite a powerful Mega form. Subscribe to the channel so that we can prevent Iron Mugulus from attempting to garrison troops outside the border of Horse Nation. This can only spell disaster for everyone involved. Thank you. In Gen 3 OU, Gardevoir is largely outclassed by other Psychic types, but it does have a few unique things to offer that some very creative players have found valid applications for. One of Gardevoir's unique tools that other Psychic types don't have is access to the move Will-O-Wisp. This is one of the best status moves in the game, and it is a scarce option in Gen 3. Gengar and Moltres have access to it, but not a lot of other Pokemon do. Gardevoir having this is something. Will-O-Wisp is able to apply pressure to Steel types with residual damage, which is a great way to break through them over time. Steel types are able to ignore Sandstorm Chip and are also immune to Toxic, which can sometimes make it very difficult to apply pressure to them and make progress against them. Burning them is one of the best ways to do so. Alakazam can sometimes struggle against Skarmory, which might seem strange. Skarmory is not a special wall, but most Skarmories in Gen 3 invest in full special defense, and Alakazam's Thunder Punch and Fire Punch are pretty low power moves that are not stab boosted, and Skarmory can shrug them off and roar out Alakazam, or inflict it with Toxic Poison. Alakazam really struggles against specially defensive Jirachi sets who shrug off pretty much everything that you can do, even Fire Punch, and often completely stonewall you. Gardevoir at least has Will-O-Wisp to significantly punish these things that would otherwise wall other similar Psychic types. Another option that Gardevoir has that is also surprisingly scarce in Gen 3 OU is Memento. Memento is a unique move, not often used, that sacrifices yourself to apply -2 attack and special attack to the enemy. This doesn't sound very good, and compared to Explosion, it's not the most powerful self-KO effect in the game, but it can have useful application for certain combos. By weakening the enemy so significantly and also pivoting out at the same time via your self-sacrifice, you can allow a very safe setup turn for an ally. Gardevoir also happens to have Reflect and Light Screen, which can also bulk up an ally, giving them that free turn they need to set up a boost. And Gardevoir also has Hypnosis, which can incapacitate an enemy, giving you the free turns necessary to pull off this combo. Compared to other Pokemon that have access to Memento, Gardevoir tends to be the most useful with its decent enough stats and all these good options it has available. The ability Trace can also come into play in interesting ways, occasionally allowing free turns against a trapped Dugtrio, as you can counter-trap them. And Gardevoir even has access to Safeguard, a screen effect that shields your team from status for 5 turns, so that can be another safety net, allowing free setup opportunities and preventing the enemy from statusing your setup sweeper. A famous team by Vapakuno, a well-known Gen 3 player, used the combination of Gardevoir and Linoone to great effect. Gardevoir, with all this utility to enhance a setup sweeper, is the perfect teammate for Belly Drum Extreme Speed Linoone. Linoone can be a really scary Pokemon if it gets the free turn to set up Belly Drum, but that's a lot to ask. It's not a very bulky Pokemon, and Belly Drum halves its health. So all this support from Gardevoir is probably the best way to use Linoone. Gardevoir has also been used in Gen 3 OU for some cheesy strategies involving its ability Trace. Gardevoir can trace trapping abilities from Magneton and Dugtrio, and this can be used to enable interesting win conditions. A creative team by the player Pokology used a Skarmory with Torment to bait in Magneton, use Torment as it switches in, and then die on purpose. Torment means that you can't use the same move twice in a row. This allows a Dugtrio to come in, trapping the Magneton with it, and using Sand Attack until the Magneton has the minimum possible accuracy. After Dugtrio dies, Gardevoir can come in, tracing Magnet Pull, and setting up a free substitute against this Magneton that is helpless to do anything. It has no accuracy, and it can't even use the same move twice in a row, and Gardevoir can therefore substitute, Calm Mind up to maximum stats, and often sweep the entire game from there. This is a very gimmicky strategy though. If the opponent is aware of this trap, they can play around it, and Gardevoir being slow is also a disadvantage here, as an Aerodactyl can come in and revenge KO a Gardevoir, meaning that all this sacrifice was for naught. But this is a good showcase of how useful Trace can be, and the genuinely unique set of tools that Gardevoir has. I would not be surprised if some more interesting applications of Gardevoir prop up in Gen 3 OU. Although it's usually not as useful as the other psychic types, it does have some real unique advantages that others don't. Beyond Gen 3, Gardevoir would struggle a lot more, no longer OU viable at all, and it was relegated to the lower tiers, often used for its Wish support, decent damage output, and other options like Will-O-Wisp and Destiny Bond too. Trace comes into play sometimes as well. In Gen 4, Gardevoir is ranked in NU, and the same is true in Generation 5. Not a very impressive ranking for this fan-favorite Pokemon. But in Gen 6, Gardevoir got a significant buff. Gardevoir gained a second type in Generation 6, the Fairy type, which is one of the best types you can get. Fairy typing grants Dragon immunity, and it also cancels out your weakness to Dark, which is significant. Dark weakness is a real problem for many Psychic types from Gen 6 onwards, as Knockoff was buffed and more powerful Dark types were introduced to the series, but a complementary Fairy typing patches up that issue significantly. Fairy also allows you to offensively threaten enemy Dark types, which is very useful on a Psychic type Pokemon, and allows for a pretty good offensive coverage combination. A base form Gardevoir ended up in UU in Generation 6, which is a pretty respectable rise from its NU ranking only one generation before. And Gardevoir also received a very powerful Mega form. Mega Gardevoir has significantly higher stats, with a massive base 165 special attack, a much better base 100 speed, and fantastic special defense as well. It's still suffering in the HP and physical defense department, but this improved stat distribution is an absolute blessing. Mega Gardevoir is a much more offensively oriented Pokemon, and it has the ability Pixelate, which is a fantastic offensive ability. This converts normal type attacks into fairy type attacks and boosts their power by 1.3 times. Thanks to this ability, Mega Gardevoir can take advantage of Hyper Voice, which gets converted from normal to fairy type, gets a significant power boost, and also has the added benefit of bypassing Substitute because it's a sound-based move. This is an incredibly powerful fairy type attack, and Mega Gardevoir is an excellent wall breaker. Psyshock is a great option to apply a bit more pressure to special walls, as it deals damage to their physical defense stat instead of the special defense stat. And with access to all those great options that base Gardevoir has, like Calm Mind, Will-O-Wisp, and Taunt, Mega Gardevoir can be a great win condition and really disrupt defensive teams. Access to Will-O-Wisp is once again one of the greatest things about Mega Gardevoir, as it allows a significant punish to a lot of common switch-ins like Mega Scizor and Mega Metagross. These are steel types that resist both Fairy and Psychic but get absolutely crushed by burn. Unfortunately, Mega Gardevoir would not have as much success in Generation 7 OU, and this is largely because it was outclassed by the all-new Tapu Lele, a Pokemon with the exact same typing, and one that is much easier to fit on teams, not requiring a Mega Stone slot. If you want to use a Mega form to synergize with Tapu Lele and its Psychic terrain, Mega Alakazam is a much better option, as it's faster and more immediately threatening. In the present day, Gardevoir is ranked in the RU tier. Megas no longer exist as a mechanic, and base form Gardevoir is mostly used in RU as a choice scarf Pokemon. Gardevoir has access to Trick, which can disable incoming special walls by giving them a disadvantageous item. There was a new Future Paradox form that is a fusion of Gardevoir and Gallade called Iron Valiant, who is one of the best new Pokemon in the entire game. So in that sense, Gardevoir is adjacent to a very powerful Pokemon. But the original Gardevoir has been left in the dust a little bit. Even Gardevoir's brother Gallade received a significant buff with the new ability Sharpness, but Gardevoir has not really gotten anything new in a long time. I think that Gardevoir could use some sort of buff, or at least some new tools to play around with, something to let it keep up with modern time, or at least be used in some new and fresh way. Overall, I think Gardevoir is a fairly interesting Pokemon. In Generation 3, I think it's at its most interesting, with it really standing out from other Psychic types and having unique tools that have led to some of the most creative teams we have ever seen in that metagame. Mega Gardevoir is also a fun Pokemon to use in the Gen 6 metagame, as a special wall breaker with cool options like Will-O-Wisp and Taunt, which aren't super commonly seen on a Pokemon like that. What do you think of Gardevoir in competitive Pokemon, and how do you think it could be improved in the next generation? Let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching. This video was the winner of a poll over on Patreon. Congratulations to Ethan Taxi for having the winning suggestion this time.